story has inspired thousands. Stephen Waddell. Stephen comes to us out of New York and has achieved a weight loss of over 100 pounds, a complete overhaul of his isolated social life, had a discovery of the holistic world, and the development of a career path that celebrates it all. So welcome to Ignite Your Truth, Stephen. We're so excited to have you here. Thank you so much.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on, Stephen. So Courtney and I are big proponents of sharing our stories. We believe that they not only serve us in removing fear for ourselves, but they also serve other people to empower them to, push through to their own breakthrough and help us build communities that can help each other. But most people are afraid to share their stories because they're still kind of tied up in guilt or shame or afraid of, am I going to be rejected if I tell my story? So we always try to encourage people that you don't really have to share the intimate details of your story, but rather that emotion or the feelings that you had during that time in your life. So that being said, can you take us back a little bit in your story, tell us about yourself, either the emotional and physical obstacles that you were dealing with that lead us up to this big experience that changed your life?
Sure. I guess, I could take you back to the weight gain, because that's when things really started to turn south. I was really actually a very lean and healthy kid. I looked like a swimmer or marathon runner. Up until about the 4th grade, my parents changed my school, and I went from a public school to a private Catholic school. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, started going through cancer, and she eventually died within 3 years. So I think those two things put a lot of stress on me, and I started putting on weight, like a lot of weight. And within 4 years, I was full grown. About 6'3". I'm about 6'4" right now, but I weighed about 270 pounds. So I'm not exactly sure how much weight I put on that time period, but probably close to 100 pounds of fat, I'd assume. And it really changed my life. It changed the way I interacted with the world. I used to think that when I remember back before I put on the weight, I used to remember being outside, being playful, the world being like a very light and vibrant place and feeling safe. But when I had the weight on, I remember feeling very scared all the time. The world seemed very dark. I started suffering from a lot of social anxiety. I didn't like being around people, which, it starts the vicious cycle, making the problem worse. The more you don't want to be around people, you bring food into the bedroom and you eat. And that's kind of how I dealt with stress, and it just got worse and worse and worse. I wanted to be around people less and less and less, and I started playing video games. And this was right around the time where the internet started growing. So by the time I hit high school, I had no social life, and I could have a social life like online with video games and stuff. And that was very bad. It would ruin my posture. I didn't learn social skills. I didn't learn how to be friends with other guys. I didn't learn how to date, any of that stuff. And that behavior continued on through college, and it got worse and worse. And then eventually in college, I found that if I could drink, I could be social. It would act as a social lubricant. Which is very bad for you. It's terrible for your health. It's bad on your wallet, and it's bad for the people around you. So I guess one day a friend had called me from high school, and he wanted me to go to a party in New York City. And for me, I suffered from so much social anxiety. I can remember it was actually a big moment for me to go to this party. I knew like 3 weeks in advance. Every day I was um, almost obsessed about it over in my head, and the anxiety grew. I wanted to cancel every single time, you know. I forced myself to go, but at the same time, I got so drunk, or I was poisoned. Still to this day, I don't know whether somebody put something in my drink or if I drank so much, because I come from a Scottish background where it's like we can drink an awful lot and not really get drunk. We had a funny game at one of the fraternity parties I went to in school where we take a breathalyzer test after drinking, and I was legal to drive after drinking like 6 beers and 4 shots. So for me to get so drunk to the point where I would trip and fall is very unlikely. But, you know, who knows what happened. Um, anyway, that night I ended up taking the subway home from New York. I tripped and fell, and I landed on the 3rd rail. And basically it burned my arm down to the bone. When I woke up in the hospital, I looked down at my right arm, and it's kind of gross, but I could literally see my elbow joint. The electricity ended up crossing my heart, so I had exit wounds from the electricity up my left arm, down my right arm, up and down my spine, and a couple on my legs. Those eventually didn't cause any scarring. We don't know how it didn't cause any scarring. But I just got lucky. We don't even know how, the doctors didn't even know how I didn't die, because I was electrocuted for what they say is at least 2 minutes, but probably 8. Because what happens is you stick to electricity, and luckily the friend who was down there with me in the subway knew not to like jump and get me off, because he would become paralyzed too. So we had to run, get police, have them turn off the power for the subway station, and then you know, they came and got me. The EMTs thought I was dead when they pulled me out of there, but I was actually so heavy at that point that the EMTs hoisting me out of the tracks for the subway dropped me, because I was 300 pounds. And I guess, you know, that moment, you know, really caused me to stop burying my head in the sand about the problems that I had, about, you know, using drinking as a social lubricant, using eating to deal with stress, and I really wanted to set up on the life path where I can get happy and healthy about life, and enjoy being on this planet, instead of it having to be a miserable and extremely painful experience for me. So that was about 7 years ago, and I started off on that journey, and the weight came off extremely fast, actually. The weight was gone pretty much within 6 months from the point of deciding to really lose it. I went from about 300 to 230 pounds, and the last 30, I weigh about 195 to 205 right now, you know, depending on how the weight fluctuates, but I would lose about 5 pounds every year through like little things, you know, working out more, or removing things like gluten from my diet. Those would really help. But the social stuff took a pretty long time to learn as well. That was really hard for me. I can remember being so isolated, having to force myself to go out to bars to talk to people about sports. I can remember being so awkward that people would make fun of me because I just didn't know how to talk to people. I would just be stuck for words, or I would try and be funny, and it just wouldn't work. And I can remember being really discouraged about that, and that taking about a year to feel comfortable enough in a social setting where I actually enjoyed being there. I left school. I started working construction jobs so I can be physical during the day, instead of being behind a desk and miserable. I can't be behind a desk all day. My body like craves movement. I crave the sunshine. And let's see, what else? Dating was another big thing. You know, I guess it was very hard for me to come to terms with the fact that I was overweight. Most of the women that I dated in the past, I wouldn't tell them that I was overweight in the past. People look at me today and they think, oh, you know, this guy never had a problem with his weight or anything. They don't understand. They see, you know, modeling pictures and you know, the way I am, and I would hide that a lot, and it was hard for me, and people wouldn't really understand that the struggles and the pain that people go through when they're that overweight, how isolated they feel, how they don't want to buy clothes, how they don't want to go to restaurants because they don't want people to see them eating, how plain and simple your body's makes you not want to work out, so you stay overweight. But eventually, after about 2 years, I started really seeing the light and started really benefiting, and I started really enjoying life. And the big thing for me was this being able to enjoy social connections with other people. And I think that came with the weight loss because I stopped feeling like people were always judging me. And that was really, really big. And I was starting to be able to trust people because when I was really overweight, I felt like everybody was looking at me like, oh, this guy's greedy, or this guy is not disciplined, or I just always felt like an outsider. And then about 2 years ago, I met my girlfriend, and now we're together, we live together, and we live a happy life in New York. And I'm trying to basically get out there and teach people how to do it, from the various angles, how, you know, the food that you put into your body communicates with your body certain things. So if you're eating a diet full of basically junk food, you're communicating to your body that there is a famine going on and it's basically time to shut down. And it starts a whole process. It starts depression, and you feel like you want to sleep all day. Social anxiety starts because you don't want to be around other people because you think that they're going to steal your food. You know, it just kind of goes back to the ancestral diet kind of thing. Your surroundings as well can have that effect on you. I try to make sure I stay around beautiful, inspiring surroundings. I've lived in bad situations before, and quite frankly, it's like when you come home to something where there's crime going on and it's dark, like you don't want to be healthy and you don't want to be around other people. So I guess that's my story.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. There's so much in it. I guess what my first question, Stephen, would be, when you came to in the hospital, was your kind of self-awakening, did it happen right away? And how did you know what steps to take? Did you reach out to somebody, or what did you do?
When I woke up in the hospital, I remember being in a lot of pain. So it definitely wasn't until I don't know, it's hard to say. I think it happened sometime in the hospital, but I was under a lot of painkillers and a lot of medication. Mm-hmm. It probably took about 6 months after I got out to really build that steam. But um, I knew once I got out of the hospital that something was wrong and I had to fix it. I just didn't know exactly what it was. You know, I didn't know it was my weight. I think that the thing for me is, at that point in my life, I never thought anything about my weight. I didn't. It's hard to explain, but I never imagined myself being capable of being lean and healthy and athletic and you know, model-esque or any of that stuff. I never even thought of that as possibly being a reality. So I think that's a common theme for people who are overweight as children. They just kind of assume that their reality is being obese, and so it's very depressing. But it took me like 6 months, maybe a year, to really pinpoint that was the main cause of all my anxiety and basically depression throughout life. But I just knew something was wrong when I left the hospital, and I was determined to figure out what it was and fix it.
So take us through some of the steps that you did to determine what it was that you knew you had to fix, and then once you realized that weight was a central point in that, how did you, a lot of, I guess coming from, you know, ups and downs in my own weight, I know, and Jen and I were just having a conversation about this morning, when you have that moment when you go, okay, enough is enough, what do you do? Reach out? Do you buy exercise tapes? I mean, what would be your best advice to our listeners if they're ready to pinpoint?
For weight, you know, I think weight's a complicated issue for a lot of people. I would say one of the most common things for anyone who's overweight is stress and how you deal with it. You know, stress from family, stress from taking care of someone, stress from the things that you eat. You know, there's a lot of people who have food allergies and food sensitivities who go on life without knowing it. For me, gluten is very bad for me. If I eat bread or any gluten, my stomach will literally like bloat up to the point where I look like I'm pregnant. And I was an Italian-American kid growing up, so we had like pasta every night. So it's like having that in your body causes a stress response on your body, and which makes you basically want to be fat. Other things like dealing with other types of long-term stress that don't go away, like a job that you hate. It can be very hard for people to ever lose weight if they hate their job, because you're doing something every day that your body basically reads as a famine. It's like this low-grade kind of stress that your body's like, that communicates to the ancestral part of your body that says, oh, you know, we have a famine going on. Let's protect. Let's start shutting down the energy systems. Let's keep on weight. So I'd say look for those. Look for long-term things in your diet, in your surroundings, in your work, your family and social situation that are kind of like dragging you down. Long commutes, 3-hour long commutes every day. Extremely hard to lose weight if you have like a 3-hour commute and you're stuck in traffic. The big reason why is you're not, when you drive, you don't actively think about how you're driving. You just kind of run on autopilot because you have to react quickly. So it's like you don't think, oh, brake now, you know, okay, body brake now. Your body just reacts and you brake. So if you're doing that for 3 hours, and that's like a stressful situation, which it is if you're in rush hour traffic, you're triggering a lot of mechanisms in your body that mock a famine if you were living in nature. So something like that will make it extremely difficult to lose weight, extremely difficult to have the motivation to exercise. And I'd concentrate on not beating yourself up over why don't you want to exercise, why don't you want to eat healthy. I would concentrate on finding the root causes of why you don't want to be healthy in the first place, really doing that self-discovery. Because once you find them, the weight, like it did with me, the weight literally just dropped off. Like I said, I spent about 6 months. I decided when I got out of the hospital I wasn't going to touch video games because I saw them really getting in the way of me communicating with the world. And that one decision forced me, and I forced myself after classes and everything to get out every night in one way or another, to either go to like one of the social things on campus. I think in Penn State it was called like the Hub, so it was like a big meeting. And even if I didn't want to have a conversation with anybody, I would sit there for 3 hours and like watch people having conversations and try and learn what a normal social interaction was. I'd force myself. I didn't have any friends. I literally didn't have any friends. So I eventually reached out to some older roommates after a couple months, but I would force myself to go out to bars alone, and that would be very, very tough experiences for me at first, because I would just feel the anxiety at a bar, and I would want to run away. I'd want to like go in the corner and like cry. It was that bad. But I'd force myself to stay in those situations and to try and figure out just what it was, why I wasn't normal, why I wasn't able to enjoy these experiences, why they were so painful to me. And eventually, you know, it's, like I said, it took me about 6 months to figure out that it really had a lot to do with my weight, my perception of myself. I never thought I was attractive at all. And that, I didn't really understand that, even after I lost the weight. I didn't really understand that either. It was actually very weird at first. I didn't recognize the person looking back at me in the mirror, and I would still make those kind of self-deprecating jokes about how I was like, big and overweight and stuff like that, and people would just kind of like look at me weird, you know. I'm just trying to think of an example. I'm just trying to. I can't really think of like things I would say, but I know there was like a lot of self-deprecation about food and like how much I would eat, and about being big, but it didn't really fit the bill because I kind of look like I do today, so I'm like making these jokes that like a fat guy would make, and I look like this, so I have like just people looking at me like, I don't know, like they come off as very jerky or whatever, but yeah, I didn't recognize the person in the mirror, and that took a few years actually.
When did your confidence and everything shift for you then? Because we talk a lot about, you know, your confidence comes from knowing who you are internally and kind of how you're hardwired and embracing all of that, and that's when your confidence really comes out. But because that was such a struggle for you before, where did you start to find that mix? Was it after you lost the weight and just kind of got more in touch with yourself, you know, internally, spiritually, this whole social thing started to shift? Like, what was that big switch for you?
I would say it came in stages. There's a couple, I guess, a couple big events where I built confidence. I'd say with work, when people started hiring me to run their businesses and entrusting me with their companies, that really helped. And then I started competing in the martial arts and basically fighting, and there was a lot of confidence built in there. But the biggest one was probably when I started being successful at dating. That was really big. because that's something that really plagued me for the whole time I was overweight. I just felt so ashamed of myself, my situation, and my body, that opening myself up to someone was something really hard. And probably the year before I met my girlfriend, which was 5 years after my, I think I'm doing the math in my head, 4 years after my accident, is when I really developed that confidence and kind of accepted who I was, and the inner dialogue changed for myself to I am someone of value, and I bring a lot to the table, and that I'm a fantastic person to be with for more reasons than one. And the confidence came from that self-talk, but it also came from real things that I was bringing to the table. I learned a lot of life skills. I'm a pretty amazing cook, actually. That's one of the things that I did to lose the weight. It's really hard to buy things that are made that are going to help you lose weight. It's very hard to make a profit on them because the ingredients are very expensive. It's very hard to find grass-fed, pastured meat, even in New York City, where everybody is very health conscious. It's very hard to find. So I had to learn to make it all myself, and I wanted it to taste good because I love food. So it had to be healthy and it had to taste good, and that was a lot of work. But in the process, I learned how to be a great cook, and I brought that to my table, the table, and that's something that everybody can enjoy every day. I started, as I got out in the world, I realized my personality was somebody that's very good to date. I don't have, a lot of the asshole-ish qualities that a lot of girls complain about. I'm pretty thoughtful and respectful, and I don't. It's extremely rare that I lose my temper. So, I guess I began to realize after really getting out in the world that, wow, I bring a lot of things to the table. Like, I'm somebody really good to date. I'm someone who, it's like if you have me in your life, it's like your life is going to be a lot better. But that took about 4 years. That took about 4 years to build that confidence. Otherwise, during that whole process, it gradually got better, but there was a lot of self-doubt. Like, there's a lot of that self-talk where it's like, I don't deserve somebody. And I wouldn't think I deserve someone because of my career, or because I ate pizza last night, or I guess various other things like that seem stupid to me now. But during that time, eating pizza the night before I would go out on a date would make me feel like the worst person in the world. And that's not a good thing to have about food, but I was just so ashamed of it. And I think a lot of people who are overweight have that, where they'll eat something and they'll feel so ashamed about themselves for eating a junk food or eating something fattening, that they'll have this self-talk, which makes losing weight really almost impossible. And it stops you from letting good people into your life. So.
Well, that's awesome. I need to do some of that. Don't you think, Jen?
Well, yeah, and I was going to say, I think for me we talk about this all the time with people. Courtney talks about it in her book. I talk about it with the people I coach, and that's the big point of our podcast is that we have each week is talking about those things and being vulnerable. How at first it's so hard to be vulnerable, but once you do, it changes everything. Like this fear goes away, and then when you do that, you have the ability to start breaking through the shame. And it doesn't matter what your guilt or shame is about. It's it's that negative self-talk again, saying I'm not important enough, or I'm not worthy enough, or I shouldn't have done this, I should have known better. I love that phrase. I'm being totally sarcastic when I say that, but people will say, well, you know, I should have known better, I'm old enough, or I've done this before, I've learned the lesson, I should know better. But it's not reality. I mean, the whole part of living an authentic life is owning those moments. And okay, yes, you made a choice yesterday that maybe wasn't the best choice you could have made, but that was yesterday. So how are you going to impact it today? What do you do differently? And I think if we become people that are more authentic about everything, whether it's our health journey or a spiritual journey or a dating journey, relationships, whatever, that we can start empowering and help each other get through it, to realize there's nothing to be guilty and ashamed of. It was what it was in that moment, and let's pick each other up and keep moving. And that's really, it's an important takeaway, I think, from your story.
I agree. And that actually leads into what you're doing now. I want to share, make sure that we share with our listeners, since we're going a little bit over our time, but that's okay. I want to share, make sure we get it out to the readers, our listeners. Your Facebook page.
Sure.
You can just search for Steve. His last name is spelled Waddell. We'll definitely have some links on our website so that you can just click right over to his page. He's got some amazing before and after pictures that are definitely inspiring. I know I certainly was. And then also visit his website. You can read his story. Again, you can see, Stephen, you've got some diet stuff on there, some health, some holistic stuff. It's actually a huge resource. Anything else that you want to share with our listeners before we go about what you're doing right now?
No, not really. I would say one of the things that I want to post more about on my blog is about a video game addiction, since I think there's not a lot of resources out there for that. And I know that you said your audience is mostly female, but you know, a lot of mothers might have sons who kind of fall into this trap, and they just can't get them away from the computer screen or the Xbox or whatever it is. And you know, a lot of times, I think, in my case, and from a lot of other people I talk to, it comes from a sense of social anxiety. So if you wanted to read up, if you have a son who has that problem and you want to read up on what to do, I would look for a lot of resources that deal with social anxiety and try and help them that way. You know, it's just something to point out.
That's a great point. Well, and honestly, most of us, and women, men, otherwise, we are all struggling with the health push because I think for the most part, for myself, I've remained totally uneducated, and I've always looked at mine as the health issues I've had, because I've had a thyroid condition for more than 10 years, and so that creates a whole different animal I have to deal with. But to actually become educated on food and the right things to eat and the way to combine everything and all that is really key. And knowing that you can do it, to see those before and after pictures, that anybody can make it happen.
Yeah. No, you really can. You really can. I'd say that the main focus of my diet is a diet that communicates to your body that you're in a land of plenty. And when you do that, you don't want to keep weight on because your body's like, we don't need this. And it's really just that simple. And you do that by taking bad foods out that have toxins and chemicals, like, you know, the pesticides. Your body doesn't like pesticides in there. It wants them out. And if it can't get them out, it makes fat to store them. Other things as well as inflammatory proteins, like some people are really sensitive to gluten. Actually, almost everybody is sensitive to it, but to varying degrees. And dairy proteins are another one. So look for getting those out of your diet. You could buy sensitivity tests. You could do home sensitivity tests with measuring your heartbeat. You measure your heartbeat in the morning for a couple mornings, see what it is. most people like 50, 60, something like that. And then you can measure it every 30 minutes after you eat a meal. And if it goes up like 15, 20 points, you just ate something that your body doesn't like. That's one easy way to measure it at home.
I think that just explained 2/3 of my diet. That makes so much sense now. That's terrible. I mean, enlightening, but terrible.
Yeah.
For me.
I'm sorry.
No, that was good.
Well, we need to close this up. Jen, do you have anything else? I think I've got my questions out there to Stephen. You did a fabulous job. Thank you so much. Jen,
No, I mean, we totally want to stay connected with you and help spread what you're doing and your inspiration and help. I mean, it's so important to us about building community. Relationships build this community, but it's about everybody that's on a different path in the way they deliver it, but about inspiration and helping people feel whole and worthy of everything in life, which is why I'm totally going to steal what you just said about the land of plenty. Yeah. And I know it applied to your body, but that's how we feel about everything. I mean, we need to see our value, our inherent value and worthiness that we come into the game with, regardless of appearance or mistakes and flaws and quirks, whatever, and that we are totally, as a whole package, a land of plenty, and we've got to shift our mindsets to understand that, so that will, play out across the board. So that's awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen. This has been amazing.
You're welcome. I'm glad. More than happy to be back if you ever want me.
Definitely. So everybody, thanks for joining us. We will wrap this up and have a full blog post for Stephen and all the links to Facebook. If you're on Twitter, anything like that, we'll hook you up with all the ways to get connected with Stephen, and we'll definitely have you back for more. So thank you so much. It's been great.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
All right, bye. Have a good one.